All right. Well, welcome everyone. So good to see you, and excited for today's conversation with Chris. So I'm going to pass it over to shortly. But I always want to kick us off by noting our next meeting, our next session coming up on June 20th. Our very own Martin Murphy, will be talking about, Kathy, did you say it's our adaptive capacity as leaders? And so excited about that conversation
Been
on
doing
June
some
20th.
work, thinking, reflection, and practicing around kind of helping us assess the different ways we are adapting to things around us. And so
Yeah,
he'll talk about his scale and some of the behaviors that will help us assess ourselves.
awesome. Well, very cool. Well, so that will happen June 20th, 1 o'clock Central Time. So same time, same place next month. But this month, today, we have our very own Chris Kyle, who is going to share with us. Very excited to hear from Chris. Chris, this is like all of the thinking and studying and everything you've been doing now put into practice in just this really awesome way. I can't wait to hear about it. And just really excited to see where all of this has gone. So I'm going to just pass it over to you. So you can
Thank
get started.
you. Thank you. It's good to see you all here. I've missed the last bunch of calls, so it's great to be back in this space. And it's been quite a busy last couple months. As some of you know, I live full-time in Costa Rica with my wife. We moved here about a year ago, so it's been pretty intense and some travel over the last few months. It's good to be back here, and the rainy season is just peeking in. So we had a huge storm last night and the power went out. It's been out, most of the morning, finally just came back on. So what I have a little presentation I'm going to do, but basically I'm really excited to share with you, as you've seen from all of Kathy's emails, is to really kind of come back to this work that I've been doing that came from, that's come out of my master's that I completed last year, May of 2022, around nature-based leadership. And I thought the next phase, some of you might have been on that presentation where I presented in a very light way my thesis and my nature-based leadership development design. And now this is kind of part two. As as Steph said, I finally had the opportunity to work with another person, this guy named Soma Miller from Ashland, Oregon, and we created our first retreat, our first leadership retreat. And so we called that retreat Emergence, the Emergence Retreat, which was in March, and here in Costa Rica, in an area in southern Costa Rica called Dominic Hall, which is on the southern Pacific coast. So I'm going to share with you literally notes from the field. How did that retreat go? Weaving in this leadership development design that I created in my thesis. So just moving on. So this is, we created a retreat and a website for it. It's called Emergence, Cultivating the Capacities. So that's a bit about these leadership capacities we'll talk about, and connections needed to rise into the next level of your life's work. This was actually a men's leadership retreat. I've been doing men's work for 25 plus years with the Mankind Project and other organizations. So Soma and I were just excited about, well, let's do something we know really well. So let's create a men's leadership retreat. Although I hope to create more retreats that are all gendered, not just men's programs, but that's what we're going to explore here. So this was, we had a really beautiful big house right on the ocean, but the Dominic Hall area has a place called the Diamante Valley, which is absolutely just stunning. It's cliffs and waterfalls and pools and a couple rivers that flow down this valley into the ocean. And so we had a lot of time to explore up in the valley and then also down on the beach and on the coast. So just for all of you, just a little bit of a primer. So in my thesis, I developed a unique framework or design for looking at how to develop leadership capacities using nature as guide, teacher and guide, and using living systems principles as a way of thinking about how do we lead. And here's the thing is, how do we lead in our own lives? How do we lead in our families and communities, our lead in our organizations? And as we were talking on the call before this, which is kind of my lens, is really looking at leadership as more of a way of being than any kind of structure or things that I do to be a leader. So meaning, oh, here's my life as Chris Kyle, and then here's my life as a leader. Most leadership gurus these days are breaking that down into, I'm the same person, and what capacities do I need to develop to be a better, quote unquote, leader in my life, in my family, in my community, in my organizations, right? So it's the whole gestalt of leadership, not just leadership as a form of when I step into the door of my organization and now I'm a leader and I have, so it's kind of, there's the role of leadership, and then there's the natural leadership, just who I am as a person in the world. So the model is really a simple framework. I really have to get a designer on Fiverr or Upwork or something like that to redo this. Kathy was encouraging me. This is like me doing this myself, and I still haven't created a really sexy, good looking one. But it's these 4 quadrants. So 4 core capacities of the first capacity is sensing, which I call looking out. The second capacity area in the blue below is feeling, and that's a looking inward or looking in. There's choosing, which is really about the active side of acting or decision making. And then being with is presencing. So the capacities, to simplify it, are sensing, feeling, acting, and presencing. And as some of you know, I've done a lot of leadership development over the years. I've coached a lot of leaders, CEOs, startups, big company folks. And what I have found is that a lot of leadership frameworks and models are overly complicated and too many things, and 5 circles and 12 components and all that stuff. And so my desire was to actually simplify it. What's really needed to be a good leader from a place of being, and then all of the other stuff of doing leadership will happen naturally if I'm committed to really understanding the principle of sensing, if I really can feel internal landscape, have empathy to feel outside of myself, and then decision-making is clear and integrated. And then probably the most important of all is I'm present. I'm fully present in this moment with you. So this is the model. And then the way that I've broken it down, which is going to lead us into my notes from the field, is when you look at that core capacity, again, sensing, feeling, acting, presencing, what are some of the living systems tenets that relate to it? You can just sort of read them there. And then what we're going to focus on today as notes from the field are the practices that I've put together based on my research, based on my own work in the wild and in nature, drawing on other people's ideas and my own ideas. So these are ones that, again, were all in the thesis and that I tested. And now I'm having a chance to do it more and more. So I've gotten more facile about how to alter these or add these or change to these practices. And I'll share with you, I didn't necessarily use all of these on the retreat, but we did go through these 4 core capacities and had a great experience with them. So just a quick overview. So the retreat, the Emergence Retreat was 6 days. There were 12 of us total. Day 1, gather and connect. And then day 2, 3, 4, and even a bit of 5 were really where kind of the rubber meets the road of really getting out in nature and utilizing these mindful practices. We started day 2 with a traditional temazcal. It's a native, sort of Central American indigenous sweat lodge, as many of you know from North American tradition, Lakota, Cree, etc. And so we did a traditional temazcal that was to really set the tone of bringing indigenous wisdom and grounding us in a purification and release ceremony. And for those of you who might not know a temazcal or a sweat lodge, it's bringing in hot rocks, usually volcanic rocks, into a structure, a very small hut, if you will. In this case, it was made out of wood and or branches and blankets, and then having that process of bringing the rocks in and having a guide us through rounds, usually 4 rounds of the door closing, some kind of ritual or ceremony inside, sometimes singing, talking. And so this set the tone of grounding everyone and creating that opening for the days to come. Day 3 was our beach and ocean experience. That's where we did sensing and feeling. We did Qigong on the rocks, so embodied practices, and then hard eyes, soft eyes, and I'll dive into that in a moment. The feeling component, we did what we call stick play, which was actually doing kind of martial arts and using other just sticks that we found to actually find flow and kind of in play and flow in nature. And then an ocean swim as well, where we were actually supporting each other and floating each other. Day 4 was jungle and river exploration, where we did the choosing and presencing. And the choosing, we decided to do a collaborative nature art project, and then releasing that in a good way, a little bit like the Buddhist sand mandalas, where they spend days and days and days, and then they just brush it away, blow it away, similar to that. And then presencing was a meditation practice and other practices around an incredible 600-year-old ceiba tree, and then actually doing some eco-sensual practices to really ground ourselves in the natural environment. And then day 5 was kind of putting it all together, kind of looking at ecological identity, eco-spirituality on a really long, beautiful hike to these waterfalls, and then a goodbye. So that was the flow of the retreat. And now kind of just diving in. So one of the things that really, that Soma and I, in creating this, we were very intentional to say that we really needed to have as much time in nature as possible, and then having some chance to process that and share. So generally we were spending 4 or 5 hours a day in some kind of nature setting and experience, and then coming back and of course eating and having meals and connecting and having circle time to share, and other processes that we did around sort of masterminding and supporting the participants in really getting more clear on what is the next step in their life. And as a leader in their organization, or as a leader in their own life, what is that for them? So the Temescal experience was really the outcome of that we heard from the participants. Was it really opened everyone? It just kind of opened them up. It's like being in a good sauna, or or some kind of where the sweat comes out and you're just feeling more open, relaxed, happy, and connected. And we had an amazing guide who's has a place called the Living Library, where he's protecting a lot of different plant species, does Temescal on the land, and kind of has small groups come in and just experience the beauty of the land, the Temescal experience, and this library, if you will, living library of plants, some of them that are difficult to find, or that are endangered in some way. And so that was the Temescal experience. And then once we had that sort of purification, opening ritual of the Temescal, day 2 was then let's get out in our first sort of experience and adventure. And this was our beach and ocean day. And this is where we did embodied practice that Soma in the middle there, Soma right here, who's a great teacher and very deep into a variety of different embodied practices. So this is actually holding tree in Qigong. And it was so amazing because this was to just, we were barefoot out on the rocks. The waves were crashing up over the rocks. So there was this quality of being very present because the waves were crashing. We were doing an embodied practice. And it was also part of the prompt was to activate all the senses. So you're obviously hearing the waves crashing. You're seeing this vista of the ocean in front of you. You're smelling the sea air, the touch of the wind or the salt on your skin. So it was like, this was a chance to activate all the senses and get really present with a simple Qigong practice that just, you can't help but being fully present in your body with this practice. And so this was that first, we're kind of leading them to that first core capacity of sensing. And so the sensing was sort of opening and activating all the senses. And then we moved into a sensing practice that I call hard eyes, soft eyes. And this just simply means hard eyes is a focused gaze, very intentionally focused, a narrow perspective or a focused perspective. One of our participants had a great way of saying this is zooming in. And then the soft eyes is a diffuse gaze and a big perspective, wide, and it's kind of like zooming out as far as you can. So you're playing with perspective intentionally and using nature to bring that creativity, that sense of awe and wonder to actually work with this idea of hard eyes and soft eyes. So some of the men would then get close to the rocks and really look down and look into a little tide pool for all the little creatures there, really getting curious and focused, what's right here. And then it might pop up like some of the images here, and just kind of an open-eyed gaze of trying to take, or working to take it all in, almost like a 360-degree perspective, if you will, is wide gaze and just feeling into the whole visual and sensorial perspective. So hard eyes, soft eyes. And then the invitation was to play with the time of it, meaning I go into hard eyes for maybe 10 seconds, and then I zoom out to soft gaze, and then I come back in. Or I might spend 5 minutes in hard eyes and then let that go, really looking and getting very focused on all the things I'm seeing, and then 5 minutes in the soft eyes. So this was like play with it. Part of the feedback on this that I've had now, I've done this several times, not just on this retreat, and I get such positive feedback from people that say, wow, I noticed how often in my life that I'm more likely into hard eyes or narrow gaze or just focused. It's like this, and now I got to do this, and now I got to do this. And so playing with the conscious, mindful practice of opening the gaze, whether it's at work or home or in the garden, and then just consciously playing with that, like any mindful practice, like, wow, I'm really punched here and I'm so focused. Let me just breathe, open up, and then playing with that back and forth. People started to see how they kind of default to one or the other, or tend to get stuck in one and missing things around them, either staying too diffuse, like pulled back and not really dialed in, or being too focused and not seeing the whole picture. So for leadership, this is perfect for the leadership terrain, the terrain of being with teams or with other people or in a boardroom or in a meeting or on Zoom, is I can play with really honing in to somebody and really being dialed in. What are they saying? What am I experiencing with them? And then to be able to see the whole space and what is in the field, what's in the whole field. So this is where it's just a simple nature practice, but it also can lead back to how do I take this back into my life, in my day-to-day interactions with other human beings or on my own. And then as we moved from the sensing practices where we were on the rocks and doing the hard eyes, soft eyes, then we came back to the shade of the coastal trees and the mangrove trees here on the beach to do what we call stick play. And stick play is it's so cool. It's just going around to the driftwood and finding 2 sticks. And each participant found 2 sticks that are about 24 inches long each. And then the intention is to actually have some fun and play with these sticks that we found that we like, to actually do some practice with them, with the intention of not only feeling internally in me as I'm partnering with somebody. And one of the practices was actually throwing 2 sticks back and forth and just actually keep catching it and moving it, almost like it's not really juggling, but it's 2 people throwing the sticks, catching it, throwing the sticks, catching it, keep it moving. And what happens is you cannot break your awareness and your presence at all. You'll get hit in the face with a stick, or whatever. And so it's like, how do you keep this sense of flow and connection with partner and with self to actually keep not only the sticks moving back and forth, but then we did another round where it was more like martial arts, where you kept the sticks connected, and one person would lead and the other would follow. So literally one person's leading, the other one's following, and you find that kind of flow of, oh, okay, I see how this person is leading and I'm following. Then you switch and the other person leads and the other follows. And then part of the beautiful practice here is when, okay, nobody's leading or nobody's following. You're doing both, leading and following. And to just see as the participants moved in and out of that, how to stay connected with each other, connected to themselves, and staying in some kind of flow. So they didn't break or stop or push each other, So how do you find ease, grace, and flow together and just keep working it? And the more time they spent on it, they got better and better at it. And then the final piece was really about doing things like closing your eyes. So staying in that connection, doing that flow like a dance, and then close your eyes. And really that's tuning into self, your own movement, and tuning into others and just feeling it, feeling the connection, feeling the flow. And so, and a lot of laughter, a lot of play here. So it keeps it enlivened and interesting. And it feels like I'm deeply connecting with human being, but also in this natural environment with these sticks and the trees overhead and the ocean crashing in the distance. So there's that kind of sense of connection there. And then the feeling practice, this part 2, was actually going into the ocean for a very gentle ocean swim. There's not big breakers here or anything. So it was very easy for us to go in. And then we partnered up, and then we literally floated each other in the water to just feel what it's like to relax and let go. And much like if you've ever kind of floated somebody in a swimming pool, or just so that somebody can relax, or it's a little bit like the Watsu, which is kind of like a water massage and flow. It's just another kind of healing practice like yoga or or something like that, or massage. And so it was this beautiful sense of then just being relaxed and present and feeling the ocean, feeling the support and being held, and then flipped partners and all that. So, and again, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of underneath of all of this is that we're doing this in a natural environment that's continuing to unfold more of all the benefits that we know nature brings. Our cortisol levels are lowering, our sense of more peace and equanimity. We're more relaxed. So and on the oceans, they talk about negative ions, if you're all familiar with that, from the ocean water. So all of a sudden, there's just this whole subterranean, these practices are beautiful, but it's spending all this time out in nature mindfully is also having its impact, and the natural environment, it's doing its work to open more and to relax the body, and more insights and clarity can come from that place. And then as we wrap up in the final 2, choosing and presencing, I didn't have a good photo of this. This is the only photo I got, but the choosing practice, I decided to do to create a collaborative art project in nature. So it's a nature art project where we created a canvas. Literally, it was just a sandy bank along a river. And this was the start of it. This definitely wasn't the finish of it. I got a shot as that the participants were individually bringing their own ideas, but also connecting with each other. The task was, you had a limited amount of time to create a beautiful art project, and you couldn't speak to each other. You could look at each other, you could eyeball each other, you could show what you got, I got these 2 rocks, or I got a stick, or whatever. And so the whole idea was to find a way to be not only choosing the pieces that you want to put in the art installation. So that was mindful, intentional choosing of the rock or the leaves or the feathers, whatever it is. And then the choosing of where do you put it in the art installation, in the art project? Where does it go? And in collaboration with other people without speaking. So it was a really great practice of every moment was some kind of choice. I'm picking up something and I'm putting it down, I'm putting it here, and in a beautiful art project. And I think somebody else took a photo of the finished one, which I need to get that shot. I know, and it was beautiful. It had so many things to it, and a big rock in the middle, and flowers around the edges that had dropped. And it was all just things that had already fallen on the ground. You weren't picking anything from a tree or pulling anything off. It was all just stuff that was around on the bank. And so the intention of choosing is really about trusting not only your mental process, but trusting your full body sense of choosing. That's the intuitive place. That's the place of feeling drawn to something. Ooh, that looks interesting. And then choosing that, rather than always in a mindset of I should do it this way, or I need to choose that because this is the right thing to fit into this. Kind of letting our mind settle enough to have what I call an integrated choosing, which is all my centers of my gut instinct, my heart, and my head are all online. It's a vertical integration of choosing. And we use nature as a way to kind of, again, activate that. And then the presencing, the final capacity working with was really there. This is pretty simple, is really just being present, slowing down, and just being with the nature that's around you and even the other human beings. And so the practice we did was actually meditating with a 600-year-old ceiba tree, this beautiful, massive ceiba tree at the base, and just doing a meditative practice together, just kind of slowing down, getting present. So it was either open-eyed to be looking at the tree or closed eyes. And then from there, from the meditation, then moving into what others have called, and I call it too, is what we call eco-sensual practices. And that's just literally kind of fully immersing yourself in the natural world with curiosity, with wonder, and with a sense of awe to actually engage. Some people might have heard of the term forest bathing. This would fit in that. Some people get kind of confused with what forest bathing really is. So I just call it like being fully immersed in nature and allowing yourself to be bathed in it. And so many of you might even know this yourself as you're just sitting in the ocean and the gently rolling, waves, or kind of you're floating on your back, or many of you, if you've surfed, you catch that wave and you feel fully present and immersed in the sort of quality of being guided by the wave, or in a waterfall like one of our participants here, and just allowing the water to just kind of hit his back and just feeling it. Others touching flowers and tree trunks. And so this idea that I know when I was a kid, so often it was the message consistently out in nature and out in the world is don't touch, don't touch, don't do that, don't touch, don't get close. Oh, stay away from that thing, stay away from that thing. And the few things that were poisonous meant that sort of you didn't touch anything because you don't know. And so with some conscious awareness of some of the things you don't want to touch, it was like, go out and actually touch and immerse yourself. That's the eco-sensual, in the water, with the plants, with the trees, with the flowers, and feel it, smell it. There was one flower blossom, I can't actually remember it, from a tree that literally smells like root beer. It's like a sarsaparilla you smell. It's just amazing. It's just like root beer. And just passing that around and like, wow, that's an incredible smell. So it's like, this is a way to bring you fully present with yourself, with the nature around you, with this kind of quality of, oh, okay, I'm here and I'm present. And again, bringing that back as we look at the feeling state for bringing it back into the sort of leadership realm, is that's all the emotional intelligence, the EQ side, right? It's like, I know what's going on inside of me, and I'm curious about what's happening emotionally with somebody else or what's they're dealing with, so that I can be in flow of knowing where I'm at, and knowing if I'm feeling frustrated or angry or I'm sad, that I can be aware of that. So that's not leaking out. My anger that I'm not aware of is leaking out on everybody else around me. So I need to understand that emotional terrain and finding that. And then also the understanding somebody else's emotional terrain, being sensitive and empathetic for others. And then the choosing is the number one thing that I've heard in all my coaching and consulting over the years that most leaders, organizational leaders, are concerned with. Many of you have the same thing too, is making great decisions, right? That quality of decision making, that as leaders, we feel like there's so many decisions to be made, or the buck stops here. And so, so often we kind of tend to use just our minds to decision make, pros and cons, and what should I do? I should write this out and get feedback, and all of that's good, but sometimes it's not enough. It's not enough. And so we have to go into other places of understanding where our choosing and our choices come from. And then presencing, much like the great Peter Senge and Arthur Sharma, they talk a lot about that one of the core leadership capacities is the ability to be fully present. This idea of presence, to see what's emerging in the space if you're fully present. So that's kind of I just wanted to focus on the practices. This is the group, and sort of by the end of the 6 days, there was a quality of, it was grounded, connected, open, relaxed, and with some wildness too. There, just a feeling of just being in nature for 6 days. And look, some of these guys, this guy back here is a senior, he's a lieutenant colonel in the military, the US military in Honduras. This guy runs a company that's a tech company this guy just sold a restaurant. And so I mean, you look at it, and you look like it's a bunch of hippies, I get it. But when you actually ask what all these people do, they're freaking amazing, accomplished people. So that's kind of my hope, is sort of like, yeah, we can also let our hair down, open up, get a little wild with each other, and feel that kind of sense of aliveness and wildness. And so on the very final day, we had a very powerful goodbye process out in nature, back on the beach, where we honored each other and saw what we saw over the 6 days in all of each participant, and gave kind of an honoring to each other as we separated and went on our ways. And I think that is it, folks. So I'm gonna stop there and just come back to all of you, and just kind of end with some final comments for me personally, this was a watershed moment of taking sort of some academic thinking, drawing on so many different rich sources, living systems theory and rewilding, and what people are doing in the mindfulness space and meditative practice, and kind of bringing this all together, and then seeing it come alive, and just feeling that these men have all come out of it. And I hope to do this with other men and women, and at all genders. So this is just the starting point, and they just came out of it fired up, excited about some kind of emerging thing in their life that they want to be attuned to, what we call their emergent charge. And they're just really fired up to keep connection with this group, and even do it again sometime soon. So the feedback was off the charts and positive, and a lot of great insights for the folks, and possibilities for the future for them.
So we thought now we just open it up for comments, questions, observations, connections. And I'll just start it off and give you this. So one of my burning curiosities is, this is a very amazing experience. So I'm just curious, in their own words, how would they describe what happened to them being a participant here?
Yeah, thanks. We did a bunch of video testimonials that I wish I couldn't do it justice, as they said, but kind of the biggest part, the biggest sort of couple takeaways from many of them were that this changed their perspective about how they can be in their day-to-day life. Many of them were bound up in their tech and the stress of their jobs and all that, and they saw that just simple practices in nature, whether that's in their local park, or taking a walk in the woods, or out in somewhere, a getaway for the weekend to somewhere that's wild, is that they can engage it from a more conscious and mindful place. And that can be healing, soothing, a balm for all of the stress or issues, or, immersed in tech. So that's one. And then two was that I didn't really go into it here, but kind of coming out of these practices and this being state that they all worked on, and we had sort of more a mental practice, if you will, around what is this emergent charge. Think of it like what's emerging in your life now that you really want to take on. So call it a purpose project, or a kind of a new vein. And it didn't have to be necessarily in work arena. It could be in relationship. It could be with building a family, but each of them came up with that. And they felt like that by doing that and pulling on that toward the end of this week, that their insights were more clear. Their passion for whatever the project, this emergent charge, was more clear. And it brought more excitement and juice to their life, for, and more of service too. Like, how can I be more of service with my life? So those are some themes, Kathy. And I think the overarching theme then, it was just, this was amazing and such a tonic that I needed for where I was in my life right now, to unplug, unhook, and just drop into nature in this way, consciously and with mindful practice. Was just kind of a game changer for them, kind of a different than even a vacation, with family. This was like a deep immersion into supporting them.
Great. Simon.
Hey, Simon.
And Daniel. Yeah, I think, Simon, you raised your hand there.
Yeah, great. Hi. I just want to congratulate you, Chris. I just think that was amazing. You know, I kind of felt like I was almost part of the 6 days there, just as you went through that. So, you know, I want to kind of, you know, recognize what you're bringing and what your, you know, co-facilitators bringing, and the kind of and the natural world, the setting that you're in. So, you know, the work that you're sort of mingling, really, you know, with all of those participants to kind of, you know, what sounded really transformative, you know, for those people.
Yeah, thank you, Simon.
But yeah, just wonderful to hear, and actually just hearing those takeouts, it just reminded me that what it sounded like was just such an embodied experience, you know, that I had this sense of, like, I don't know whether you did it, but I was just like, oh, you know, this is like kind of, you know, just get out of the head, really be in the body, you know, sense everything there is to sense, that's not just kind of thinking, you know, in the kind of very
Yes,
you know, sort of rational left brain. I don't know if you come across Ian McGilchrist's work, you know, the divided hemisphere, the divided brain. You know, it's something I'm really into now. So it just resonated so much that it's okay, yes, there is that. And I really like the hard eyes that spoke to me about that kind of left brain, you know, look and grasp. But, like, you know, come on, you know, come and get that right brain going, and
that's right.
you know, all those other ways of knowing, you know, sort of really deep sensing and deep feeling, deep, you know, imagining, and it just sounded wonderful. And yeah, I'd love to recreate something kind of with you on a land somewhere, and
Yes.
it'd be wonderful to sort of, you know, kind of just tap into more of that. It just speaks to a lot of the work I'm just emerging with in myself at the moment. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Simon. It's really beautiful. And what you talked, that was a key component of not only was there this nature component, but Soma and I talked about that it's really about dropping into the body and using embodied practice, which we did every morning. We did yoga and meditation and a little bit of movement practice every morning, which I didn't talk about, to kind of prime the pump to be in our bodies fully out in nature. So if there were 2 things that we were weaving together, was embodied practice with nature-based mindful practice, right? That's, so you really got it. And we were very conscious about the integrating of the 2 sides of our brain, at least the left brain, right brain, the kind of practical, you know, more literal and sequential focused, and then into the right brain, more creative, open. And we were always looking for ways to weave those together. And even the emergent charge work was toward the end, where that was more up in the head, thinking and planning and looking at, but they'd had so much time in their bodies and in the right brain creative that it was like fueling that, where there was more insight and clarity, I think, that underpinned the intellectual side of things. Thank you for sharing all that you shared. And I would love, stay connected and let's talk. And there's already been 3 different people that have asked me to come and do a half day or a full day of what I do as part of their retreat. So I've just noticed that it's kind of in the zeitgeist for me now. So I'm looking at doing anything, supporting other people's programs, doing mine, weaving in. So let's stay connected.
Daniel, and then Shim. I'm sorry,
Thanks.
go ahead. Did I interrupt you, Simon?
So thank you.
Okay, Daniel, and then Shim.
Yeah, can you all hear me? My sound just, okay, good. Chris, what a beautiful experience. I could feel the movement through. And so 2 things. One, honoring the work that you did in this manifestation of you creating space for these men to go through this experience that was so intentional. And I love what you said at the beginning. So often leadership things are complex or complicated, and frameworks, it's just too much for most people to handle. I was both surprised and not by the simple exercises that I'm reading this. I'm like, oh, that's very, very simple. And then the richness that came out of it as you described what was happening with these folks. So honoring that and this beautiful creation that you helped co-create. My question is, do you think, did you start the week with asking them what they hoped for? Like, did people come away with what they hoped for, or did they not even know what to expect? Those takeaways were helpful to hear kind of from those video testimonials, but did they go in with an intention around this emergent charge? paying attention to that? Or what sort of setup did you give as they came in?
Yeah, thanks. They did on the first night, we did a welcoming set of practices embodied again to just welcome each other with eyes, not a lot of chit chat, but just connecting. And then round 2 of that was each person sharing an intention. They didn't necessarily know what was going to unfold. They didn't know all the practices, but to just trust themselves and what's an intention that they have. And so each man shared that, wrote it, journaled it out, and then shared it verbally. And it's a good question. I don't know if and it's something for the future, is we didn't really have the space or time to come back to that. Like on the last day is like, go back to your book. How was your intention met? Was there something new from it? We didn't actually get back to that, but I like that as a potential bookend. But I do know that many of the men just said that they got more than they expected, like a lot of them had not the lower expectations, but they thought it'd be like an adventure out in the way and have fun and be connected and maybe learn a couple things. But I don't think they realized how mindfully we were going to spend time in nature and how much that infused them with more thoughtfulness and presence and connection to self, and also insights for later in the week when they were working on their emergent charge. So yeah, the intention piece was there at the beginning, but we didn't really book it. We didn't come back to it.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thanks,
Tim,
Daniel.
you want to go?
Thank you. And Chris, thank you so much for sharing. It sounds like such a beautiful experience you've been through and kind of life-changing for everyone that was involved. So no, just thank you. And I think a couple of things that came to you, one of them was similar to what Daniel just asked around kind of how much they knew going in. But one of the questions I had was, how did you find the men, and how much do they know about this kind of practice? How much did they or maybe not know anything about this kind of practice or living systems thinking or nature-based leadership, whatever, going in? Like, were they primed, or are they just leaders who were interested in a new way of doing things? So yeah, how did you source them? How much did they know?
That's a great question. I mean, first and foremost, for this first one, it was mostly from my network and Soma's network. So it was certainly people that had some experience with us, but a number of the men that were there didn't know us either that well, or they were on Soma's email list and listened to his podcast, or they were part of, people that knew me through the Mankind Project. So good. So to your point, there were probably 2 men in there that really didn't know us at all, but that's 2 of 10 didn't know us at all. They just kind of had found it through other folks. So one thing is the pump was primed because there was already a level of trust, of me and trust with Soma, so again, trying to do the same experience where I sell it to an organization and they put leaders into it, totally different thing. I would probably create something radically different as well. And then in terms of this part 2 of that is how much they were primed. We had I showed you that kind of first, the banner of our website. So the website really did its job to try to sell the experience. And we also wanted a mystery in the experience. So I didn't put my model in there. We didn't want it to be heady. You're going to go through these specific practices, but we did talk about it's going to be some nature immersion practices. We're also going to do some personal masterminding. We're going to work as a collective circle time, feedback time. So we had all the components that they could get a feel for it. But all the things we did were a mystery. And even the model, I actually had a chance to teach it very briefly on the beach with a stick, drawing it in the sand and stuff. It was great. It was like storytelling from 10,000 years ago around a fire. And it was just so beautiful. And so I did do some teaching and context setting on the retreat, but they were not primed for that.
Thank you. And just one other reflection I had just before, again, when Daniel was speaking, you were talking about the weaving of the right and the left brain thinking and kind of bringing that together. And something that came to me as well is you said it was a men's group based on your previous work, and at some point you'd like to bring in women and different genders. And at the same time, it almost feels like there was something beautiful in it just being men and weaving feminine practice with masculine practice. Yeah. And kind of the dance between those as well. So that feels powerful.
Yeah, thank you, Shimrit. So, I've done work in men's work for 25 plus years. Daniel and I are part of the same organization, the Mankind Project. but I've been actually feeling like there's a next evolution, and the organization is now kind of so big globally that it's got what works. And so to your point is, I feel like a real leading edge for men right now in terms of just practice to be better men, to be better fathers, to be better husbands, to be better partners, whatever that is that we need to be weaving in the mature masculine and the mature feminine, and all of us can do that. So as a woman, it's where's the mature sacred masculine in me and my feminine, and that's without having to create a model or tap into your goddess within, guys. It's just being in nature does that. It just does that. It's Gaia, it's the mother, it's this kind of sensual opening to our softness and our care and our compassion. And so what was so beautiful about this retreat is we didn't teach a lot, Shimrit. We didn't, in other settings, I teach more. We let the experience do the work, and we literally let nature, the living system that is this planet, Mother Earth, Gaia, whatever you want to call it, she did her work. We didn't even have to do anything. And that's where I can get out of the way as a facilitator and just say, we're going to go into the ocean and we're going to float each other. Mm-hmm. So Dan, simple, super simple, and so profound for these men, because Shimrit, it was like they were nurturing each other. It was a very feminine thing to be in the ocean, holding the upright, holding the neck up so the face isn't falling in. We're just holding each other and just kind of moving around, and it was just very simple and very loving. And to your point, it's like that experience is getting an experience of allowing the feminine to come in without having to be too heady around it or too teachy or preachy. And that's what I'm super excited about.
It reminds me a lot of braiding sweet grass, and some of the things that Robin talks about is as a teacher, she just had to step back and let nature do the teaching, and the students were just open enough to accept it. So yeah.
You're so right. And I read for my thesis, I read the book,
yeah.
And I love it. She's amazing. And other books, like Mikai Mortali, who's wrote a book called Rewilding. That's another great one for you to check out. That's kind of a nice counterpoint to braiding sweetgrass, because he gets into the very specific practices in nature that can open you up. They're kind of awakening practices. He brings a strong spiritual lens to it. And, Shimrit, my lens is leadership, but ultimately it's just a personal development experience, right? It's just developing myself through the lens of like, how could I bring this back into my leadership roles? And some people are using a spiritual lens. This is going to help you meditate better and be more aware and awake. And we'll all have these lenses. But for me, I just want to get people back into an intimate, loving connection with the earth. And as Robin says in Braiding Sweetgrass, is so much magic will happen there that I can't even, I can't, even as an amazing facilitator, I couldn't make that happen where somebody has some breakthrough or insight, in nature that is important to them.
It strikes me that to invite nature in as a master teacher requires a leap of faith and a shift in this kind of human, we have to control everything worldview. And nothing outside of ourselves is recognized as having an extraordinary kind of deep wisdom or value to it. So there is definitely a shift that has occurred even to go down this path, I think.
Yeah, and it is a hard one to say, well, a teacher, well, what do you mean, Chris? Like how, I can stand out in nature, and you're saying it's teaching me things. And in a way, two ways I say it is just watch, slow down and watch, and you'll learn things. Yes. And two is that there is a symbiotic relationship between human beings and the earth, because we are part of the earth. We are nature. So that's just want to presence that. We continue to talk about nature and human beings, and we are nature. And so that in some ways, when I'm out and I'm allowing myself to just be open, insights, thoughts, and awareness arises that could impact my life. And that's when I talk about master teacher. I don't know when that'll happen. That's the classic vision quest that we all know about. Native traditions across the world have the pan-cultural vision fast. It's almost every indigenous culture has it. And you send somebody out, or you go out alone whenever you're ready, and you spend days out in nature, and then things change you as a human being. And I think in some ways we're Kathy, we're reclaiming that for our modern times, and there's lots of people that are doing it and organizations that are doing it and programs and such, but we can do it on our own as well, to just spend that time for the master teacher of the natural world or the more than human world to help us to navigate our lives, or to see something differently, or to simply just open to a way of being that helps us in our stressful lives, more relaxed, more open, more trusting, whatever that is. It doesn't even have to be the insight going off.
Sukaya.
Hi, Sukaya.
Hi. I'm in awe and gratitude for the amazing experience that you're providing for these people. It's really humbling and really inspiring at the same time. So thank you. My background is in education, and I guess there's a part of me as a mum of two boys. I'm just really excited and fascinated about the potential for this with children and young adults. Yeah. And so in my mind, I'm sort of ruminating in that exciting direction. And I am curious about your take on that. So in terms of sort of that rewilding and the potential, maybe even in traditional school settings, where do you see the potential or the relevance or the possibilities, I guess, in that space?
Yeah, I mean, you probably, Suskaya, you probably have heard of Richard Louv. I'm sure many of you have. The Last Child in the Wood, the Nature Principle, Nature Deficit Disorder. So I would just say that I've drank his Kool-Aid, which is that the potential here is to just get kids in the educational system, whether the traditional education system or an alternative educational system, get them outside. Just them outside and playing for hours a day. You can have some classroom time, but get playing. And then part two with that is I would love to see a more of an educational orientation to not just playing like recess, but there's mindful practices even for kids where the teacher has a set. This is like Mika Mortali, has a set of simple practices for kids to we're going to go out and we're going to do this. And let's do hard eyes, soft eyes now, everyone. And that's a perfect one. Whether you're 8 years old or you're 80 years old, everybody gets that when you describe hard eyes and soft eyes, hard eyes. So it's stuff like that I really see a potential to have this kind of rewilding orientation to allowing more of time in nature, mindful practice, even for kids, where they're doing activities that are really thoughtful around engaging nature in a way that brings more awe and wonder. And I love that the tracking schools are doing that, Suskaya, the the Outward Bounds of the world and the Knowles and all that. There's great organizations, but it hasn't really penetrated the educational system, at least in North America and other parts of the world, where there's enough time where you integrate nature is part of the teaching of who you are. And so hopefully there will be more of that. It's great that you mentioned it. I actually have a personal passion project, kind of my emergent charge, where I want to create a summer camp for kids, for young adults, 17 to 21. I want them a little more mature, where they're looking out like Greta Thunberg. They're looking out in the world going, we got to do those fuckers. And so I want to create an inspiration, a camp where it's the nature-based leadership, all this stuff in a way that they can grasp it, that's both this immersion in it, but also seeing the capacities that they can start developing as young leaders. And then what is their emergent chart? What do they want to take on around solving some of the challenges on our planet? What are they feeling called to? So there would be that pull. So I have a passion for that. It's not the younger kids. I really want them to kind of have enough maturity and can engage the practice with a little bit more adultness. But that's still that's still young, young people, young adults.
I'm thinking about sort of restorative practice and theory use stuff, which is sort of my space at the moment, or my headspace at the moment, let's say. But I feel like these quadrants, there is real potential there to make that meaningful and lived experience, and really specific in terms of educational spaces and settings. The simplicity that you're talking about in terms of these leadership capacities are things that my 6-year-old or 7-year-old could actually understand.
Yes.
And I just think there's such potential there, perhaps to harness that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to put that out there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your sharing.
Well, we'll stay connected because I definitely want that more educational lens too. How can I weave this into different environments and different places? So thank you. Thank you for
I'm going to wrap us up. We have a couple more minutes. I was speaking with a woman. Well, I was listening to a podcast of a woman who speaks from an Indigenous worldview and experience and culture. And one of the things that she thinks about leadership is that leadership is a way of being. It's not a set of practices or skills that you learn or techniques or whatever. And I'm just think that where Chris is going is that it's a practice, a leadership development practice, as well as a human practice that helps us get in touch with our whole self and this kind of framework of leadership as a way of being. And one of the other things she said on her podcast was she basically says that an Indigenous worldview is all about relationships. And so if you're not in relationship, you're not reflecting this kind of framework or way of seeing the world, because the world is filled with relationships. So it raises some, and what you're doing is you're creating this embodied experience that is basically about being in relationship to everything around you. It's pretty cool. So thank you so much, Chris, for bringing your practice and your field notes back to us. It's a nice follow-up. And then come back next month on the June 20th, and Martin Murphy will be sharing his frameworks and his assessments for us to kind of begin to measure our own adaptive capacity. He kind of goes from regression to resistance to adaptive to robust is kind of his arc around adaptive capacity. So it should be interesting. So thank you so much for showing up and sharing your thoughts and connecting with what we're doing here. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, good to see you all. We'll see you next month.
Okay.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye.